Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today from your homes and your workspace. I hope you're well and staying in touch with family and friends as best you can given the social distancing restrictions. My name is Georgie Duckworth. I'm the Director of Business and Arts at the American Australian Association. And today we commence the first of a series of online events presented to you by the AAA. The American Australian Association was founded on the back of World War II, and for the past 100 years has been a reliable source of information and support for businesses and individuals and families living and working overseas. As COVID-19 continues to disrupt our daily lives and impact the global economy, private business owners and large corporations are increasingly at the forefront of making tough decisions over a period of prolonged uncertainty. Given widespread travel restrictions, job furloughs and job losses, today's immigration webinar is focusing on providing viewers with much needed clarity and information. To do this, I'm delighted to welcome our special guest speaker, Zjantelle Cammisa Markel, attorney and principal of Cammisa Markel. Zjantelle will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on expats in the United States, with a particular focus on the concerns faced by E3 visa holders and their employers, but also explore issues faced by other US visa holders. Being on any employer-sponsored visa in the US right now can feel scary, and not having a plan in place for managing this situation may underline that sense of fear. Please be reassured there is a solution, even if temporary, for everyone. The current travel restrictions make the need to renew or apply for a visa rather impossible. However, Zjantelle's presentation will provide guidance to address the main questions and concerns you have sent through via your online questions. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Zjantelle right now, who will commence her presentation. Thank you, Zjantelle.
Thank you, Georgie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And what I'd like to emphasize from what Georgie said is that, you know, in this time, very stressful time of COVID-19, I want to stress that your immigration status should be one of the fewer things you should be worrying about, because there is always a solution. And so tonight we've gathered a lot of the questions that we've received over the last few weeks and tried to answer those. Hopefully your question will be answered tonight, but I want you to know that if it's not, I'm always available to answer your particular questions as well. So we put together a bit of a PowerPoint to sort of guide us through this presentation. I'm going to take us to that now. Okay, so we have our, what we thought we would start with is we would go through, there's a few terms that are going to come up as we speak tonight. So those terms are I-94. So hopefully all of you that are participating know what an I-94 is. And if you don't, you should get very familiar with it very quickly, because it is what governs your stay in the United States. Your I-94 date is basically the date when you come into the United States and you're inspected by an immigration officer. That officer gives you a date that you're allowed to remain in the US until. That date pretty much trumps any other date. So if your visa expires or your LCA expires, your I-94 is what governs your stay in the United States. You'll see there in this PowerPoint presentation, which you'll all get access to after this, there should be a link at which you can then go to retrieve your I-94. But in any case, you can always retrieve your I-94. If you just Google retrieve I-94 online, it will take you to the correct link, and you'll know pretty soon that you're on the right link. It'll ask you to put in your passport number, your name, and date of birth, and it'll take you to your I-94. And that date is really important. And also be guided that your I-94 date changes every time you travel in and out of the United States. So every time you re-enter the United States from international travel, you should double check that I-94. Okay, another term we're going to talk about is visa stamp. So that's the that's put into your passport. So unlike, for people in an O1 or H1B status or something other than an E3, you often will have an approval notice. That approval notice doesn't allow you to enter the United States after international travel. It's the visa sticker in your passport that does, which is the visa stamp. So LCA, we're going to talk about the LCA a lot this evening because it will govern a lot of your options. The LCA is a document that's attached to both the E3 visa and the H1B visas. And we're going to talk predominantly about the E3 because I know a lot of Australians are on E3, but I will touch on some of those other visa categories throughout the evening because a lot of you are on a different visa and or green card. So, and if your particular question again is not answered tonight, happy to answer those after this seminar. So the LCA, if you're on an E3 or an H1B, you'll be pretty familiar with it. It's the document that sets what your salary is going to be, and your visa, your E3 visa, is valid for the duration, and your ability to work is and authorized to work is attached to the dates of that LCA. So again, I've just put that reminder there. Remember, your I-94 trumps everything else, your visa date, your LCA date, your 60-day grace period. We're going to be talking about 60-day grace periods, and you always have to leave or file an extension or file some kind of petition with USCIS before your I-94 end date. Okay, so we're going to cover a few scenarios that you might find yourself in or questions that you might have. So one of the scenarios that we've had a lot of questions from is that you're still in the US and your visa is expiring and you need to apply for a new visa or your appointment got cancelled. And before I go to this, I want to just address because this will be quicker, the people that did leave already and had an appointment booked and now they're stuck outside the United States. In case you're participating from outside the United States and that's you, for you, you should know that you should just keep in touch with your immigration attorney who will be able to allow you, or if you don't have one, just keep going on to the website for booking an appointment, because appointments are now available for June, end of June and beginning of July in Australia. And so you should be proactively booking your appointment already from now. And we'll go over some other options for those people coming up. But if you are in the US and your visa is expiring, or you need to apply for a visa with a new employer, or and you can't travel to go do this now, which is what E3 applicants are typically used to. Everyone's used to leaving the US, going to a consulate abroad and getting their visa that way. Well, what's the options? Okay, you can renew your E3 from within the US if you are applying and extending with the same employer. One of the benefits of this is that your ability to work will be authorized automatically for 240 days. And that applies even if, so say your visa is going to expire within a month and you file that extension and you haven't got an answer on it and then your visa expires. It's okay because you're granted this 240 days of continuous work authorization even while your case is pending. And the idea is that your case would get approved within those 240 days. Or alternatively, you might leave the US and consular process if you have to. Okay, another scenario is, okay, I am not extending with the same employer, but instead I got a new job offer and now I can't leave to get this new visa. What am I going to do? You can file a change of employer petition within the US as well. The only problem here is that you cannot start working with the new E3 employer until that petition is approved. And right now, USCIS is taking about 2.5 to 4 months is what they report as how long it's taking them to approve those. Alternatively, if you're on an H1B right now and you need to change employer, you're in a little bit of a better position because H1B visas have a special portability provision that allow them to start working as soon as a petition is filed with a new employer. So they don't have to wait for the approval. So if you're on an E3 and you file to change a new employer in the US, you'll have to wait for it to get approved. Often what will happen is people will use that filing in the US as a means to remain here But if it's still pending and the consulates and travel opens up and it looks like your petition might still take a while, a way to speed that up is to just abandon that pending petition and go on consular process. And when I talk about consular processing, what I mean by that is going to the consulate abroad and getting the visa in your passport. Another reminder that I just want to put in here is that if you extend your visa in the US or you file a change of employer within the US, next time you travel internationally, you will need to consular process, which is put the visa stamp in your passport again before you re-enter the US, because filing here doesn't give you a new visa. It just gives you status. So the next time you travel, you will have to do the E3 visa appointment.
Zjantelle, can I just mention one thing here?
Yes.
The 340-day extension, is that irrespective of COVID-19? Has that always been an option?
The 240-day extension has always been in place. So that is not part of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so one question that has come up a lot is, what if my I-94 is much longer than my visa expiry or my LCA expiry? So this is a scenario where I'll give an example. Someone says, my visa is expiring in July 2020, but my LCA, my I-94 goes until January 2022. What can I do? This happens because often the immigration officers muddle up the E3 with the E1 and E2 and give you 2 years stay upon entry, your last entry to the US. So that's where you might see that happen. So there's a lot of inconsistency, and that's why it's also really important to check your I-94 after international travel. So a lot of, it's a bit of a gray area, but there have been, there is a way to potentially file a new LCA to bridge you for a period. If you do find yourself in that scenario, because it's a little bit tricky, and I don't want to go into it at length and take up too much time in this scenario, in this presentation this evening, definitely reach out to either me or your immigration lawyer who can guide you on what benefits you can take out of that extended I-94 and for how long. Okay. So, ways that you can stay in the United States if your employment has terminated. So a lot of people right now are finding themselves losing their jobs, unfortunately, or employers are questioning, what can I do? Do I terminate this person, or what are my other options here? So if your job has terminated, some of the options, you have a one-time 60-day grace period for the duration of your visa. And that applies both to E3s, H1Bs, O1s, and multiple visa classes. It does not apply to J1s. But you could get rehired by your same employer within 60 days, or in that 60-day grace period, you could file a change of employer with a new employer if you got offered a new job. So let's just go over those options again. So I've just been terminated. How can I stay in the United States? 1, get re-employed with your same employer within 60 days. 2, get a new job with a different employer. And if you can leave and go get a visa, great. But right now, no one can leave and go get a visa. So in that instance, you could file a change of employer petition that will keep you here. And 3rd, if you can't be re-employed by your same employer, or you haven't found a new employer within your 60-day grace period, you do have the option of filing a change of status from within the US to tourist status, which is B2. And you can request up to 6 months in that status. So effectively, if you do it at the end of your 60-day grace period and you request 6 months, you've effectively given yourself 8 months that you can be in the United States after you've been terminated from your job. But note that if you do switch to B2 tourist status, you're not allowed to work, and you can't leave and re-enter the US if you've done that, because you'll abandon that. But in that 8-month period, if you did get a new job with a new employer, hopefully we'll all be able to travel and the consulates will be open again, and then you can go get a new visa, or you can also be rehired from your same employer again. If they weren't ready to rehire you after 60 days and they say, you know what, we're not ready. A lot of the hospitality clients are in this position. I've found, initially they thought we should be up and running again in 60 days, but some are thinking not. So one option might be for their employees to change status to B for a little while, and then they can re-employ them again at a later stage when they're ready in that 6-month window after the 60 days. Another option to stay in the US is to look, if you're married, you could look to your spouse's status, and if they're a primary visa holder, you could switch to a dependent visa of their status. Note that they need to still have their job for you to be able to do that though. But when you're married, each spouse can look at the other's visa and hop on the others.
And then Zjantelle, if you are to become the E3D, the dependent, you can work across any sector, irrespective of where you've studied or your qualifications?
If you are the dependent, you have a work authorization document, you can, it's like a little driver's license. It's a plastic card that lets you work anywhere, doing anything. You could be working related to your degree, unrelated to your degree. The spouses get it good on this one.
Okay, thank you.
So they are very fortunate in this scenario. And they're fortunate, you're going to see where they get fortunate again coming up in another question. Okay, so this is a really common question right now, coming both from employers and people on visas. Can I be furloughed? Can my pay be reduced? Can I take unpaid leave? Very, very common questions. So you are not allowed to be furloughed if you are on an E3 or H1B. Other options are, you are allowed to be terminated for 60 days and then rehired. So that's one way of pausing someone's pay or pausing your employment. With respect to your pay being reduced, so this is where the LCA becomes important again, because technically your pay can be reduced below what was put on the LCA, as long as it's equal to or above the prevailing wage on your LCA. So that's really important. So as long as the reduction in your pay still remains equal to or above the prevailing wage, that is okay. It can sometimes be beneficial for people, sometimes not, because often people's actual wage is not that much higher than the prevailing wage anyway, so it might not give enough leeway to what the employer might have been anticipating in reducing the wage. But it's good to know, and it's definitely a strategy that you can look at as an option. Some people have said, can I change from full-time to part-time? Some people's E3s or H1Bs or even O1s and other visas, TNs, might have, so we do have some TNs of Canadians, Mexicans, we do have some Canadian, Australian nationals, I know that, you're out there. So those can be part-time visas. For the E3 and H1B, if your LCA was filed as a part-time, you can reduce your hours. So that's one way of reducing your pay. You could either, become unemployed completely, or you could just reduce that pay to fewer hours. Okay, so if you wanted to change to part-time though, because your LCA was not filed as part-time, you can't actually do that without filing a petition to change from full-time to part-time. So for an H1B, similarly to before, when you file for a new employer, they can get paid part-time hours and the part-time hourly rate as soon as the petition is filed. However, if you're on an E3, you can't get paid the part-time rate until the petition is approved. So that's not too beneficial for E3s. So you're better off looking at either stopping work for 60 days or reducing your pay to the prevailing wage as options rather than filing new petitions, because that can become costly and defeats the purpose of the reduction in pay and or a period of unpaid leave anyway. How else can someone take unpaid leave? If the company has policies for unpaid leave, so perhaps you may have been, we've had a couple of clients that have called who have been on maternity leave and said, can I extend my maternity leave? As long as the company policy says that, you know, after whatever the company's paid maternity leave is, if they have paid maternity leave, you know, we offer you to allow you to have extra maternity leave, then you can take that. If you've had an accident or if you have, some companies have policies that after you've taken your paid leave, you can take extra unpaid leave. So as long as it's in the company policy, you're allowed to take unpaid leave as long as it's at the employee's request. So the employer can't say, I want you to take more maternity leave or I want you to take unpaid leave right now, but the employee can request it. So that's one way of also having a period of unpaid leave. So the next slide, we have what are the alternatives to unpaid leave, and we just really went over those, which was you could stop working for 60, you know, be terminated and then rehired 60 days later. You could change to B2 status, buy more time for that. And in that time, you could get rehired by your same employer or a new employer. This question has come up, it's really, really popular right now, especially with all of the government grants and benefits that are coming out. Can I apply for unemployment insurance? And this pretty much applies for most of the visa categories, is what I'm going to explain, which is when you're on an E3 visa or even another visa, you're only allowed one 60-day grace period of unemployment in the duration of that visa. So technically you're allowed to be unemployed for 60 days. So you could try to apply for unemployment benefits in that period. However, one of the requirements of unemployment insurance is that you need to be ready, willing, and able to accept employment. And case law for E3s and H1Bs has shown that if you are, to be able to accept new employment, you need to file a new petition or get a new visa. So that technically means you're not ready, willing, and able to accept employment with a new employer because you have to file that additional petition. So if you do apply for it in that 60-day period and you're granted it, which could happen, you just need to know that they might later deem that you weren't qualified for it, and that can happen in an audit, and it could happen up to 2 or 3 years later. So you might have to pay that back. You could get asked to pay that back. So you might want to figure out, what is it that I'm going to get? Is it worth it for me if they ask me to pay it back? Do I want to take that risk? So if you are a green card holder, however, you can apply for those unemployment benefits and unemployment insurance. Also, if you are the spouse of an E3 or L1 or E3D and you have an EAD and you lose your job, but your spouse, who's the primary visa applicant, has not lost their job, so meaning you're able to maintain your status, then you are able to, as long as you qualify in all other aspects for unemployment insurance, meaning that you've actually been working and you've been working the required amount of time, I think it's 2 quarters in that year, then you actually can apply for unemployment insurance. So there's another benefit that the EAD spouse gets there. Another question that's come up a lot is, if I apply for unemployment benefits, and will this affect a future visa application or my ability to apply for a green card, or if I'm a green card holder, will it affect my application for citizenship? Traditional unemployment insurance, the way that it's paid is that it's coming from a pool of money where it's been deducted from the payroll. And so it's not considered a public benefit that will trigger what's called the public charge rule. So the government has now said that if you're going to become a public charge, that could affect your ability to get a green card or citizenship. But so the answer is, traditional unemployment insurance will not affect your ability to get a green card and citizenship. However, under the CARES Act, That's federally funded government money. And so it's unclear yet whether that will be considered disaster assistance. If it is considered disaster assistance, which we would think it would be, but it's still unclear, then that is typically precluded from triggering public charge as well. But right now, we're pretty much advising our clients to apply for the traditional state unemployment insurance, but perhaps hold off from the CARES Act because that is not clear yet. Okay, and the disclaimer. So just want everyone to know that everyone's situation is different, and while a lot of these provide some ideas for solutions for your particular situation, always have an attorney look at your I-94 and your visa and your situation to figure out exactly what's right for you. And details there, we are always available and looking to assist as many of you as we can to lower any anxiety at this point in time as possible. Georgie, I think we had some more questions that were not covered by our presentation that came up. We got lots and lots of questions. So we tried to group them into categories and ask the most common ones. Georgie, you want to take it away?
Yeah, we've got some great questions. So this one's interesting. So if I leave the US, can I work remotely for my employer, even if my visa has expired? And in that situation, can I then also get paid into my US bank account?
That's a great question. Also because it provides another option for people. So if you are outside of the answer is yes. So you can work for your employer outside the US and continue to get paid into your US bank account. So US immigration does not, you only need to abide by the rules of your visa and have a visa if you're going to be working for your employer physically in the US. So that's also an option for people who may have left and be stuck outside the US right now, and they were extending their visa. If their job is one that can be done remotely, then that's great because they could continue to work remotely and continue to get paid until they can finish processing that visa and get back here to the US.
That's excellent. Okay, so here was another question that was presented at the time of registration. If I am furloughed, can I return home to Australia and then return back to the US on my same E3 visa once things have picked up again?
Yes, so that's another great question. As long as if you leave, you can not work, it doesn't matter what you're doing when you're outside of the US. If your visa is still valid and your employer says, hey, we're ready for you to come back and you can start working, you can come back on that visa as long as it's valid. Typically, we will say to clients, we like them to have, if it's been an extended period of time since they've been out, then we would like them to have a letter from their employer confirming their employment and that the employer wants them to resume employment pursuant to that LCA and visa that's in their passport.
Okay. Here's another one. I'm in Australia and my appointment got cancelled. Is there any other way to get my visa faster than waiting for the next available appointment, which currently sits around July?
That's a really great question. So up until about a week ago, you could apply to mail in your application for a renewal or for a change of employer to the consulate in Australia, as long as you have been temprinted, which is you've been to the consulate before and you've had your fingerprints taken, you could mail it in. And we actually did that with a client of ours, and because his appointment got cancelled, and he got his passport back with the visa in it within a week, and it was actually 3 days. It was amazing. So we tried to do that again middle of last week, and it turns out that they have suspended that service. So it's no longer an option. However, I would keep, if you have an immigration attorney, keep in touch with your immigration attorney to see if that reopens, because I think that once the offices reopen and appointments are resumed, that some people might be able to use that option before they are able to get an appointment. So let's say right now you can book an appointment for July, but the consulates reopen for the June appointments, for the people that have June appointments. You could choose to change your application. Instead of going to your appointment in July, decide to do a mail-in instead. Mail your application in June and get your passport back in June and come to the US instead of waiting until July and going to that appointment.
Convoluted.
Sorry. So basically, there might be the opportunity to get the visa put in your passport by mail-in sooner than an appointment.
Okay, I understand. All right. And I can imagine there'd be quite a bit of backlog too of people trying to scramble for those available appointments.
Yes, although they're not available right now, the mail-in, but there is a scramble for the backlog of appointments. So on that note, what we're really encouraging people, if your visa expires anytime between now and the end of the year, you want to be thinking about booking your visa appointment already from now, because consulates do have their calendars open for, I know that I think Bahamas might even have May available and open. I don't know if those might get cancelled, but right now they have availability in May. Barbados is not till November. London has June. The the consulates in Australia have, some of them have end of June and the others in July. So you want to, but the thing is that the people whose visas are coming up for expiry are going to be taking up July, August. So if your visa expires in August and you wait till July, you might not be able to get an appointment until way down the line. So you want to definitely be thinking about your renewals already from now. Mm-hmm. That also applies, Georgie, just going back to anyone that's on an O. I know a lot of our listeners and attendees are on perhaps an O visa. Premium processing has been suspended. So if you are looking to get an O1, you would want to file that sooner rather than later as well, because otherwise you could be waiting a long time for an approval.
Okay, so this question here is for students. I've been accepted to study in the US in July this year. Will I still be able to secure an F1 visa?
Yes, so as long as your school has issued you an I-20, then and if you can leave the US and get an appointment at a consulate, then you can get the visa put in your passport and re-enter, and you'll be able to start school on time. If you can't get a visa appointment before then or can't leave, then it could be problematic, because if you're in the US right now and not in F1 status and you need to change to F1 status, filing within the US is taking about 5 months to get an approval of that, and sometimes longer. And you can't start school until it gets approved. So you would miss the beginning of school. So the only way to start school right now is really by going and getting that visa at a consulate abroad and then re-entering. And I just want to also let people know that if they are going on F1 status, there's my dog in the background. Sorry, everyone. He is giant, so he's a loud bark. If you are in that scenario, don't be too stressed out, because there are separate calendars for people trying to get F visas than E3. So when you're booking your appointment, it asks you what kind of visa are you booking for, and they're conscious of the fact that F students have a certain start date. So hopefully those people will be able to get an appointment sooner than maybe someone that's waiting for an E3, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's one regarding COVID-19. Can the duration of my visa be extended due to COVID-19, even if it's not expiring soon?
This is a really great question, and one that has come up across multiple visa categories for us. So I'll explain what I've been hearing that request to mean. So for example, we have a well-known comedian who we applied for an O1 for, got approved, and he was supposed to go to his interview in end of March, and that appointment got cancelled. And now the next appointment is not until June, end of June or July. And so his agent and he is saying, well, can my visa now be extended so I get the full 3 years? Because now I'm only going to get 2 years and 9 months. Similarly, with people on an E3 or other visa category that might have just entered the US and they aren't, you know, working to their full capacity, they might say, well, now I've only got a year and 9 months rather than the full period of my visa. Are they going to tack this time onto the end of my visa? They're not going to. It doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, the time you got left is the time you've got left.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is the government giving extensions on Esthers, visas or grace periods that are about to expire?
So that's a really great question as well. So on grace periods, there is no extensions. So if you've got a 30-day grace at the end of your J, or you've got a 60-day grace that we were talking about previously, those are not being extended because people have options. You can file to change your status from within the US to tourist status. So they're not giving options because they're not giving that extension because there are options. However, if you are on Esther, and I know there are a few questions that people had that came in on this one. If you're on an Esther and if it's expiring within 2 weeks or 2 weeks of when you reach out to deferred inspections, there is a way to request what's called a grant of satisfactory departure. And the border, so what you need to do is contact the border of where you came in to the US. They have what's called a deferred inspections unit, and you have to show that you're supposed to be leaving within 2 weeks of the date you call. And then you have a flight that will leave after, you know, within 30 days, and they will grant you an extended period of up to 30 days. They'll give you a new 30-day period extended at the end of your Esther to be able to remain here. Right now, there is no way to extend that. Beyond that, I don't know if they might grant that, but right now it's a 30-day extension on an Esther that they are giving to people on Esthers that are expiring and can't get out of the US.
Okay. So again, for students on F1, so when moving from an F1 to an E3 or an O1 at this time, how should I plan the next few months as my visa expires in July?
Okay. So if that is, so for the person that is, firstly, you want to determine whether you're going to be applying for an E3 or if you qualify for an O1 and you're going to be applying for an O1. So you definitely want to, from now, book an appointment with if you're going to have an immigration attorney to help you figure that out. You'd want to make sure you have that consult. And then once you've determined which way you're going to be moving forward, if it's with the E3, you want to be trying to secure, if your visa expires in July, you want to be securing that appointment already from now. If you are going to be trying to apply for an O1, you also want to be submitting that application, that petition with USCIS sooner rather than later because of the fact that they have suspended premium processing right now. They might reopen it, and then once they reopen it, if your petition is still pending, you can convert your case to premium processing. So for those that might not be aware, premium processing is when you pay the government an extra $1,440 to adjudicate your case within a 15-day period, and that's calendar days. So if you don't pay the $1,440 and you file regular processing, it can take the government as long as they like. It could take 4 months, 5 months to adjudicate a petition. So there are many visa categories that typically have the ability to be premium processed. E3 has never had it, still doesn't have it, but O1, H1B, L, some of these other most of the other categories do have the ability to be premium processed.
Okay. What happens if I file an extension now from within the US, but I leave before it's approved?
If you file an extension now from within the US, but you leave before it's approved. Okay, so if you're filing an extension, my guess is that your visa, by the time you leave, that visa that's in your passport is likely expired. So if you leave, then to be able to come back, you will need to go and do a visa appointment at the consulate abroad to be able to come back. So just know that you won't, just because you filed within the US doesn't mean that you can just come back without doing that visa appointment. That's very important.
Okay, so that's standard practice. All right. This one here, this is actually the final question for green card holders. So what if I'm a green card holder and I return much later than expected, which I think is the 180 days? So let's say a couple went back to Australia because it was safer to be there for COVID-19 and they're stuck there beyond the 180 days and they're green card holders. What do they do?
Okay, so I think the anxiety there comes from a lot of permanent residents and green card holders have heard that they can't take a trip outside the US that lasts more than 180 days because often your immigration lawyer puts that in your head. And the reason why is because if you have more than 180 days outside the United States at one time when you're on a green card, that can break your continuous presence to be able to apply for citizenship. So that being said, you can still return after 180 days and before a year has gone by. So you're only considered to have abandoned your green card if you've been out of the US for more than 1 year at a time. So don't be too stressed if you can't get back within a 6-month period. And if it ends up taking you closer to a year to get back, that's fine. You'll still be able to preserve your green card and you won't lose it. And even if it does go over a year, there are ways to still preserve your green card.
Okay, thank you, Zjantelle. Now, look, we did have some other questions that were presented. Do you feel that we've missed anything that's been integral to your presentation this evening?
I think that we've covered a lot. We can go to any other questions that you think that might be relevant to people. I know that as we were speaking, I had some questions come in. Let's see if any of those, actually I think with those questions, a lot of them did get answered.
I know that a majority of what we were covering was for E3 visa holders, but was there anything that we potentially could cover more for students that have been perhaps granted scholarships? Would that become an argument, do you think, for their petition for securing their visas?
I think that for those students, again, they will need to consular process their visa to be able to get here and be here on time. Oh, you know what? A good point that you've just brought up. So if you are outside the US and you aren't able to mail in your application now because that's been taken away from you, and you can't attend your appointment until July or August, the soonest available. If you do have an emergent need to be in the US, there is a way to request an emergency appointment. So if you, for example, you typically reside in the US and you were extending your visa, but you're stuck outside the US right now, and you've got the rest of your family is still in the US, or you're the CEO or you run a important US business and that business can't run here without you. If there is compelling reasons as to why you absolutely need to be in the US right now, there is a way to apply for an emergency visa appointment, and they are still granting those, but you just want to make sure that your reason is a compelling one.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could come up with some compelling ones. All right. Well, I think, Zjantelle, this has actually been a pretty remarkable presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I hope it's given some people a little bit of ease and the shoulders have dropped a bit when it comes to their visa situations. I personally am on an E3, so you've given me some reassurance and guidance, and I do feel better about my position here, especially because I'm the one supporting my family's visas as well, and health cover, I might add. So on behalf of the AAA, thank you so much for today. And for everyone out there that still has some questions that need to be answered, please do contact Zjantelle directly. She'll be able to provide some consultation time with you so that everyone is safe and happy and in a solid place considering what's going on out there in the world. So we look forward to seeing you all again online soon, and please do take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgie, and everybody, please stay safe.